Should you train through pain? The answer is yes, and it's no. And if anyone tells you that it's always one or the other, then they're oversimplifying a very complex problem. Pain on its own is not always automatically a red flag, but misunderstanding the pain signal or ignoring it entirely is usually where people get into trouble. Now, before we go any further, let's just be clear about the context. What I'm going to talk about here is based on published, peer-reviewed pain science, rehab research, the athletes and patients that I coach, and my own experience of rehabbing a pretty complex neck and shoulder issue last year. This is also about training with pain during an injury rehab phase. What I don't want you to do is take this as a license to ignore persistent symptoms and grind through your normal program. And it's definitely not about toughness. Finally, much of the research I'm going to reference refers to chronic pain, that being pain which has been present for more than 12 weeks. Any time before that, and we could still be dealing with a normal healing time for an acute injury. So ultimately, it's about understanding which pain you can work with and which pain that you shouldn't. And pain is a really individual thing. So if at any time you are not sure what to do, seek the advice of a professional who can help you. So let's dig into this, and here is what the science says in relatively plain terms. We now know that pain is not a direct measure of tissue damage. You can feel pain without tissue damage, and tissue can be damaged without pain. That makes it a little bit more complicated. You see, pain is an output of your nervous system, influenced by fatigue, stress, sleep, previous injuries, and how your brain interprets movement. Modern research shows that carefully dosed exercise, even if it causes mild pain, is usually safe and often beneficial. In fact, studies that have compared low-level pain exercises versus strictly pain-free exercises show better functional improvements when mild pain is allowed. Well, why is that? Well, it's because exercise does more than just build strength. It can reduce pain sensitivity, improve confidence in movement, and help your nervous system adapt. Put simply, pain that's low, predictable, and settles quickly is usually safe to work through. Yet I still hear of practitioners telling patients that the solution to their problem is not to do the thing that's causing them pain. Now, if that happens to be something functional like putting your hand overhead, or it's going to mean that you're robbed of something that brings you joy, that is generally very lazy advice and basically says, I don't know what to do to help you. Remember, the shoulder is a joint that is designed to move and in order to position the hand in space. Stopping movement because it hurts rarely works. Restricting movement in these cases usually worsens long-term functional outcomes. So instead of asking, is there pain, we need to reframe that and ask, how does this pain behave over time? And let's talk about how you can apply that. In a rehab setting, training through low-level pain is acceptable if it follows some clear rules. And these are the ones that we share with our clients all the time. Pain should stay at less than a 4 out of 10. Pain shouldn't escalate during the session, and it should settle quickly afterwards. We also want to see that pain is not worse the following day. If pain behaves like this, it's usually reflecting a load-related or inflammatory response, not tissue damage. The tissue is being challenged and not threatened. Exercise triggers mechanisms like exercise-induced hypoalgesia and central nervous system adaptations, meaning low-level pain often signals safe adaptation, not harm. But this only works if you understand the type of pain that you're dealing with and how it is going to behave over time. To provide some applied context from a personal perspective, last summer I had to unpick a fairly complex issue in my left shoulder. There was definitely some neck involvement as well. What started as a relatively mild niggle that was only really affecting my pull-ups turned into something much more significant after I went downhill mountain biking in the Alps. 6 days, aggressive terrain, wearing a helmet. I then came home to a stressful month and the balance tipped against me and the symptoms started kicking in. When I reached into a forward position and flexed my spine, I got this red hot burning stabbing sensation in my upper trap. Definitely some neural involvement, as I said, but it stopped me training with any real intensity while I peeled back the layers. Shoulders are complex, they can be really irritable, pain can cascade, migrate, or show up in unexpected positions, making it often difficult to know where to start. The key point, however, was that the rehab wasn't pain-free. It showed up in predictable positions and patterns, but I knew that if I moved through it, carefully loaded the movement patterns that were irritable, that I could expect that pain to decrease. However, just to make sure we don't fall into a trap at this point, we need to remember that it's not all about strength. A paper published recently highlighted that exercise-induced pain relief isn't just about getting stronger. The researchers found that there was no causal link between strength gains and reduced pain across conditions like tendinopathy, rotator cuff pain, or osteoarthritis. The gain, therefore, is to carefully but intentionally restore function, adding strength, yes, but also using movement and load to stimulate a number of positive effects, including reducing the fear of movement, improving one's pain self-efficacy, changing your beliefs about pain, and supporting neural and biochemical adaptation. That's all part of a biopsychosocial approach that we now utilize in rehab over a purely mechanical based model. Now let's talk about bad pain, and that's a loose term, but it's probably likely that when you feel that bad pain, you know that it's not a good thing. Now, not all pain is safe. Sometimes your body is signaling that the load exceeds your capacity. And remember, we're talking here about pain which has been present for more than 12 weeks. Let's call it red flag pain. Usually shows as something which escalates during a session. That pain may well linger for hours afterwards. The pain is likely to be worse the next day. And it's also causing you to alter the way that you move, your movement patterns, and affecting movement quality. If symptoms continue to worsen also across multiple sessions, it doesn't always indicate tissue damage, but it does mean that the system is under too much threat. And ignoring that is how problems can persist. So as a coming to land, here are the principles to remember. When we're talking about safe pain, it's going to be low level, predictable, settles quickly, and that's usually focused around adaptation and not injury. We can work through that. If it's bad pain, which escalates, lingers, or disrupts your movement patterns, modifying training significantly, that's going to deserve a little bit more respect and attention. Training through your pain isn't about toughness. Avoiding all pain doesn't build resilience either. So it's about smart decision making around load and exercise selection. At the shoulder, this matters even more because control and movement confidence, not structure, is often the limiting factor. Progressive strategic loading restores function safely via a number of mechanisms, as we've discussed. So should you train through pain? Yes, when it's low level, stable, and improving over time. No, when it escalates, lingers, or changes how you move. The important point is to recognize the difference and to adapt your training programs and strategy accordingly. Working with a rehab coach or clinician can help you interpret your pain and guide loads safely. That gets you back to where you want to be in the fastest possible route. It's easy to spend time guessing with pain, and it sometimes can be really frustrating. Good rehab and reconditioning is coach supported, and it's not prescribed and aloof, particularly when you are trying to navigate a return to training and sport. So if you want to learn more about the science and practice of rehab, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.